Welcome to the 2D Physics Explosions utility for Unity. With this utility, you can emit force from any game object with the addition of a single script. Here are some examples of the different explosion types. With that brief demonstration of the utility's physics effects out of the way, let's see how it works. For this example, we'll be using an empty game object, but the explosion script can be attached to any game object you'd like. The first step is to simply add the explosion force 2D script of your choice to the game object. Of the 7 explosions included, we'll cover the single explosion first. The layer settings field determines which layers will be affected by the explosion. Tag filter allows you to easily control which game objects will be affected with the Unity tag system. If left to 0, there will be no tag filtering. Minimum and maximum depth specifically refer to the Z coordinate. With a -5 to +5 range, every object with a Z coordinate between will be affected by this object's explosions, but any object with Z below -5 or above 5 will not. You can, instead, toggle game object depth to true, which will only affect objects whose Z value match the game object with the explosion script. The script allows you to use trigger colliders or solid colliders, but one of these has to be active for the explosion to work. Finish action is where the game object or explosion script can be modified once the explosion is finished. You can either destroy the script, destroy the game object, or deactivate the game object. The activation mode can be set to any combination of on-click, on-disable, or on-enable. On-click is useful for testing, as well as for any part of the gameplay loop involving the player clicking to explode an object. The explosion settings include explosion radius, which you can tweak either with the handle in the editor viewport or with the fields in the inspector. The offset is a distance from the center of the game object the explosion is attached to. Explosion force can be increased or decreased, and the modified by distance setting can be toggled on to taper off the force as objects get further from the point of origin, or off to have consistent force across the entire area. Force mode can be either impulse or force. The simple difference is impulse tends to be much more powerful than force. The full explanation is the formula for impulse is mass times distance over time, while force uses mass times distance over time squared. It's a small difference in the formula that has a massive effect. The onExplosion event allows functions to be executed when the explosion is triggered, much like any other Unity event. Now let's use a simple example for the send explosion damage. We just have a simple box object here with this example box script attached to it. The script includes a health value and a public method taking a float as an input so we can reduce the health when triggered. A debug log entry will show the new health value. After the box is set up, we'll add the explosion script to an empty game object. We then need to enable send explosion damage and set the function to be called. Setting the explosion damage to 10, we can trigger the explosion and there in the log is 90 health remaining. By enabling the damage falloff, we can move the origination game object so the box is about halfway from the center of the explosion, and, after it is triggered, you'll see the box has taken roughly 5.5 damage instead of 10. Don't require receiver is enabled by default, so there will be no error raised when a collider's object does not have the specified public method. Let's quickly run through the attractive explosion effect. While the rest of the scripts explode outward, the attractive explosion allows the origin to draw objects closer before launching them away. As long as you keep that difference in mind, the settings are very similar to the rest of the explosions. I hope you'll find the explosion utility quite helpful in your physics-based 2D projects.